Good afternoon. I am a student in this HerMA in Heritage Management operating in Elefsina. Therefore, I welcome you to this underestimated city. Today, we'll share with you some thoughts on interpreting and managing mountainous landscapes, more interpreting than managing, from the point that I'm familiar with. This is the Zagori in northwest Greece. So, Zagori is a part of northwestern Greece. It's the red star over there. You cannot see it, I'm sure. It's right over Ioannina, next to the Greek-Albanian borders. Okay, now we got it. It is quite different than what you imagine from Greece the first time you visit the country. The map of Greece is full of blue. Zagori is full of green, it's next to the Pindos mountain range, an area full of valleys, gorges, and mountains. It has a long history from the Paleolithic, when groups of hunter-gatherers roamed the area around 16,000 years before present. All subsequent phases of human civilization are attested in the region. The most important for this talk is the sedentary populations that range from the 14th century to the early 20th century. It is a sedentary population of farmers that developed in the region, and their civilization aimed to subsistence. Therefore, they expanded every niche possible in the landscape in order to cultivate cereals and pulses. They shaped the cultural values of Zagori as they are known and promoted today. So, surviving in the mountains the whole year, with only the production from the mountainous fields, was not an easy task, and subsistence was never or really difficultly achieved. This is why the male population of the villages migrated in the Balkans, then belonging to the same Ottoman province with Zagori. They were experienced craftsmen and merchants, doctors, who made fortunes in the big Balkan cities. They were sending the surplus back to Zagori, to their families, so that they could buy from other regions what was missing from their own domestic production. During the 18th and the 19th centuries, when this phenomenon peaked, there was enough surplus to be channeled into architecture for reasons of social competition. In such a society, architecture was the only means of social differentiation. Therefore, we witnessed the creation of magnificent big houses, like the ones in the center, churches, like the one on the right, and schools. In what concerns the wider landscape, they created stone arched bridges, a trademark for the region when it comes to cultural heritage. Those bridges were built in strategic places in order to link the communities with each other, but also to connect Zagori with the wider Balkan world. But Zagori possesses a great deal of natural values as well. It is home to many endangered species, such as the Pindos lizard, the brown bear, the lynx, and the chamois. In this land grow more than 1,800 plant species, many of them endemic, with their name assigned to the Pindos species. In its alpine and subalpine zones, we can trace many primary ecosystems and ancient, genetically speaking, forests. Because of its great importance, it is protected by national and international legislation, and it is a member of UNESCO's Geopark network. In this slide, you can see some of these values. It's the chamois, the wild goat on the top left, an alpine landscape, and the type of orchid endemic to the Zagori region. After this introduction to some of the values of the area, we are now able to discuss the problem. And that is that the landscape of Zagori is divided in a bipolar manner into cultural and natural. Everything that is inside the traditional protected villages is culture, while everything that is considered culture, while everything that is outside of those villages is considered natural. Therefore, you see on the picture on the left, a type of these settlements, a threshing floor below, a church, and a big house, while on the other side, you see some endemic species of orchids and the mountains below, which are considered landscape. The bridges and the monasteries that are spread out in the wider landscape are exception to this rule. Now, when this you cannot see anything, there is too much light, sorry. This misunderstanding started in a turning point of modernity when the modern Greek nation state was constructed. When Zagori was under the Ottoman rule, the whole landscape was used for agricultural and pastoral activities. 102 years ago, when Zagori became a borderland to the modern Greek nation state, all the lands outside the villages were legally transformed into forest lands. And after the 60s, no one of the elders was left to contest those fields, as the abandonment of rural areas was already profound. As a result, if someone takes a look at the black and white picture, okay, you cannot see, but the main idea is that all this area, from the aerial photo, you see that it's cultivated fields. You can almost detect agricultural terraces on that. And on the Google Earth image nowadays, the whole area is forested. So, yeah, this is a picture from the 40s when some of the fields were actually cultivated and the fields were reaching to the river. As a result, it becomes obvious that the natural landscape is full of hidden archaeology, therefore cultural elements. Those elements, such as agricultural terraces, threshing floors, and water mills, were never highlighted because focus was given on the monuments created by the imperial mercantile wealth of the male emigre population. There was never an interest for the material traces of those practices that left their trace in the landscape because it was not architecturally important. This wrong bipolar division of the landscape served the touristic agencies as well, as they are selling now a well-defined destination with distinct cultural and natural characteristics. As a result, everyone is happy with this idea and no one digs further. What I want to argue is that we can bridge this gap and understand the values of Zagori archaeological landscape. And to do that, we need to inspect the cultural and natural values of the place intertwined. The first argument for this approach lies in the name of Zagori itself. Zagori comes from the Slavic phrase Zagori, which means behind the mountains. Therefore, the name of the cultural entity of this region is nothing more than a Hellenized version of the identification of the natural values of the place, the mountains, in Slavic. As a result, the merging of the values starts even from the name Zagori. The next step is to render this relation visible. Now, okay, we might get something out of these pictures. It's the same landscape, but shot from different distances. The big tree on the left picture and the tree over here is the spot I want you to focus. There are two ways of interpreting this picture. The easy way of looking into this landscape is to suggest that it is a very old plane tree with its roots expanding both ways horizontally because there is much water and the tree roots didn't need to dig deeper to the ground. The second way of looking into this is to acknowledge the natural values of this old tree, but realize that its roots are extending in the margins of a water channel leading to a mill race some 100 meters away. This is an example of values intertwined. To make things clearer, I have taken Western Zagori as a case study. This area is defined by the flow of Voidomatis River here. So, in the western back of Voidomatis lie two monuments very important for our case. The first one is the monastery of Virgin Mary Spileotissa. It was built in the 16th century and it played an important role in the economic history of the region. The monastery was the owner of the most fertile lands, lending them into the nearby villages in exchange for a considerable amount of the production. It is a designated post-Byzantine monument of great architectural and art historical interest. Therefore, it is protected by the effort of antiquities. Only a kilometer away lies a monument which does not share the fate of the monastery. It is not designated nor protected by legislation. The water mill, the ruins of it you see over here, next to the river, was unlucky enough to be in the side of the monuments of unimportant character for the research. Despite the fact that it is adjacent to the monastery, that it is of great architectural significance and that it completes the picture of the economic activities of the monastery, it is forgotten in ruins, like other rural archaeological remains in Zagori. Let us now see what values intertwined signify in this case. This is an argument I thought, based on phenomenology, after Professor Gagnazza's talk, I might reconsider. We start with the monastery of Virgin Mary, the Speleotissa. Speleotissa means of the cave. Indeed, one of its rooms, the room over here, is incorporated in the natural cave in the rock. It is a perfect expression of the most fundamental value of Zagori civilization. This is that people exploited every possible advantage provided by the natural environment, assigning to it cultural values. The room that incorporated the cave was used as a storage room because it was substantially cooler than the other rooms of the monastery. The same case of natural values transformed into cultural ones can be argued for the function of the watermill. So the watermill is here, the monastery is here, and the mill race does this curve. It does not begin with a spring, it just extracts water from the river. So, as it was extracting water from the main flow of the river, it was assigning to it cultural values into those waters. It is the value that defined the economic process expressed by the watermill. This water empowered the turbine, which performed the cultural activity, grinding, defined by social needs. In the other side of the watermill, water was thrown back into the river, naturalized once more. In the case of both monuments, one of the fundamental values of the civilization of Zagori is being stressed, that people use the natural values of the landscape and attributed to them cultural ones. This almost poetic interwoven cultural and natural landscape is manifested in all the aspects of the Zagori civilization. Intervention to the natural environment occurred when it was absolutely necessary. The most imposing example is the staircase of Radeto, and here, linking local communities through what seemed to be an impenetrable mountain. How am I doing with time? Okay, then I have time. So, before jumping to the last part of this talk, I want to make a case. Zagori is protected by the most strict legislation, Greek and international, about natural values. In the core of the national park, you are not allowed to cut one tree, one flower. You're not allowed to swim in the rivers. You can do nothing. But there is a problem, because the whole area used to be a cultural landscape. By just protecting without forest management and without any other, let's say, precaution, we just destroy even more the cultural landscape. And archaeology might be the tool to restore that thing, because we don't dig, but everything is hidden under the trees. Reaching the end of this presentation, the emerging question is how to enhance those intertwined values and promote the full archaeological cultural landscape of Zagori. The idea suggested is not entirely new and comes from a scholar of Zagori, Fanitios, who in 1964 wrote a manifest with 25 points on how to reverse the abandonment of the area. One of his 25 arguments was the extravagant one to transform all the 40 water mills of Zagori to hydroelectric plants. I do not go that far, but I propose a similar but rather different solution. This is to restore the water mill and transform it to a museum dedicated to the rural character of Zagori civilization. If the water mill could work again, this time as a hydroelectric plant, it would render electric subsistence to the monument, the museum, therefore might channel as well its surplus of electricity to the monastery in order to render it open to the public once more. This way, the values of Zagori archaeological landscape would become visible to the public. This might sound a bit far-fetched, especially because in terms of legislation we are that back, but negotiations with the owner of the two monuments, the Holy Diocese of Ioannina, are being put forward, and we hope for results soon. Thank you very much for your attention.